Rain lashed against the taxi window, blurring the London streets into streaks of gold and gray. I clutched the invitation in my hand, the thick, embossed cardstock feeling alien against my work-roughened fingers. The annual Sterling Foundation Gala, my family's event. The one I hadn't been invited to in 10 years, not since my mother died, and my father decided I was a lost cause. Before we step inside, I whispered to my reflection in the window, a habit I'd developed for my small online following. I want to know who's with me on this journey. Where are you watching from? Tell me your city in the comments. And when this is over, I need your honest opinion. What would you have done in my shoes? We read every comment. Now, let's begin. The taxi stopped before a grand Mayfair townhouse, its facade glowing like a beacon of old money and unshakable tradition. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out into the downpour, my simple black coat a stark contrast to the ermine and velvet swarming the entrance. The grand ballroom was exactly as I remembered, a sea of tuxedos and diamond necklaces, the air thick with the clinking of crystal and the low hum of power. I saw them immediately. My father, Alistair Sterling, holding court by the marble fireplace, his silver hair perfect, his smile a polished weapon. My older brother, Julian, stood at his shoulder, the heir apparent, already mirroring our father's posture, his gaze sweeping the room with casual ownership. I moved through the crowd, invisible. A server offered me champagne. I took it, the flute feeling fragile and dangerous in my hand. I was halfway to them when my father's eyes found me. The polished smile didn't falter, but it cooled by 20 degrees. "Elara," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation around him. "This is a surprise. I wasn't aware you were in the country." "I got an invitation," I said, holding up the card. Julian gave a short, humorless laugh. "That was a mistake, surely. The guest list is for stakeholders." His eyes traveled over my off-the-rack dress. "How is what was it? The pottery studio in Cornwall? It's a community arts center," I said, my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "And it's doing well. We're expanding." "How quaint," my father said, the word a delicate dismissal. He turned slightly away, a clear signal that my audience was over. "I'm sure the local artisans appreciate your efforts. But if you'll excuse us, we have actual investors to speak with." The old wound, the one they'd been picking at since I was 16, and declared I wanted to build things for people, not portfolios, throbbed anew. They saw my work as a hobby, a phase of rebellion. They had no idea it was my life. "I'm not here for a blessing, Father," I said, a little louder. A few nearby conversations stuttered. "I'm here to make a proposal. For the foundation." Julian's smirk was a masterpiece of condescension. "Elara, the Sterling Foundation funds hospitals and universities. Not pottery wheels. It's not about pottery. It's about the Northcliffe Project." The air around us went still. The Northcliffe Project was the foundation's white whale, a massive, abandoned industrial site in the north of England that had been a money pit for a decade. My father's one notable failure. "The Northcliffe Project is closed," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It's a dead asset. We're liquidating it next quarter." "It's not dead," I countered, pulling a slim tablet from my bag. "It's misunderstood. I've spent the last 6 months there, talking to the community, studying the land. The cleanup costs are high, yes, but the potential is higher." I opened the files I'd prepared, the plans I'd worked on during cold nights in my tiny flat above the community center. "It's not an industrial site. It's the future site of a renewable energy park, with a training center for green jobs and affordable housing, built with sustainable materials. I have the preliminary approvals from the local council. I have interest from 3 major green energy firms." I thrust the tablet toward him. He didn't take it. "You have no authority," he hissed, his composure finally cracking. "You are a dilettante playing at business. You will embarrass this family and this foundation with your childish fantasies." "Are jobs childish?" I asked, my voice ringing out in the now silent space around us. "Is clean energy a fantasy? You'd rather sell the land to some conglomerate who will warehouse it than invest in something that could actually help people?" "Help people?" Julian sneered. "This family built its fortune by being pragmatic, not philanthropic. You've never understood that. You're just like your mother, soft, sentimental, and utterly incapable of understanding how the real world works." The mention of my mother was the final, unforgivable blow. The grief and the fury I'd kept bottled for years finally boiled over. But instead of shouting, I felt a terrifying calm settle over me. "You're right," I said, my voice dropping, yet carrying to every ear in the vicinity. "I am like her. She was the one who saw the soul in things, the potential. You only see the price tag." I looked my father directly in the eye. And you're wrong about one other thing. I do have authority. I reached into the inner pocket of my coat and pulled out a single, folded document. It was old, the paper crisp and yellowing at the edges. My grandfather's will, I announced. The original, the one you thought was superseded. It contains a clause you and your lawyers seem to have overlooked. I unfolded it, my hands perfectly steady. In the event of a fundamental disagreement on the direction of the Sterling Foundation's major assets, any direct descendant can call for a legacy review, provided they present a viable, alternative business plan for the asset in question. I looked up from the paper, meeting my father's stunned gaze. I am calling for that review. For the Northcliffe project. My plan versus your liquidation. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. You could hear the ice melting in the champagne glasses. My father's face was a ghastly white. That clause is. It's archaic. It hasn't been invoked in 60 years. It's still legally binding, a new voice said. An elderly man with a kind, weathered face stepped forward from the crowd. Mr. Abernathy, my grandfather's oldest friend, and the former head of the Foundation's board. I witnessed your father sign that amendment, Alistair. He feared the day the Foundation would lose its heart. It seems that day has come. The following week was a media circus. Sterling heiress challenges dynasty. The battle for Northcliffe. My father and brother used every weapon in their arsenal. Smear campaigns in the press, pressure on the board members, offers of lucrative consulting roles if I would just go away. But I had something they didn't. A story that resonated. The story of the privileged daughter fighting for the little guy. The community in Northcliffe rallied behind me. My plans, detailed and fully costed, were picked apart by experts and found to be not just viable, but visionary. The day of the board vote, I walked into the Sterling Foundation headquarters for the first time in my life. I wore a simple, professional suit. I didn't look at my father or brother as I took my seat at the long, mahogany table. The debate was fierce. My father spoke of risk, of tradition, of protecting the family's wealth. Julian spoke of market forces and shareholder value. When it was my turn, I stood. I didn't talk about profit margins. I talked about people. I showed them pictures of the derelict site, and then the architectural renderings of what it could become. I showed them the letters from the community, the commitments from green energy partners. I spoke of my grandfather's original vision for the foundation, to build a legacy that was more than just a number in a bank account. The vote was called. It was close, painfully close. But when the final tally was read, the Northcliffe project was mine. My father stood up without a word and walked out. Julian followed, shooting me a look of pure, undiluted hatred. Mr. Abernathy was the first to shake my hand. Your grandfather would be proud, he said, his eyes glistening. That was 2 years ago. Today, the Northcliffe Renewable Park is operational. The training center has its first graduating class. Families live in the affordable, energy-efficient homes. It's become a model for post-industrial regeneration, featured in magazines, and studied by urban planners. I no longer live above the community center in Cornwall. I have a flat in London, and an office at the foundation, where I now sit on the board. The work is hard, the battles are constant, but they are my battles. This morning, a courier delivered a package. Inside was a small, velvet box. I opened it to find my grandfather's signet ring. There was no note. I slipped it onto my finger. It was heavy, solid, real. Later, as I was reviewing proposals for our next project, my assistant told me I had a visitor. It was Julian. He stood in the doorway of my office, looking older, the arrogant set of his shoulders gone. Father's ill, he said without preamble. He'd like to see you. I looked at him, then at the view from my window, a view of a London that was changing, partly because of the work I was doing. Tell him I'm busy, I said, not unkindly. Building grandfather's legacy. He nodded, a flicker of something that might have been respect in his eyes, and left. I turned back to my desk, to the plans and the proposals. The storm I had inherited had been fierce, but I had learned to sail in it. The girl they called sentimental and soft had outmaneuvered them all. Not by becoming like them, but by refusing to. And in doing so, I had finally claimed my true inheritance.